Hey, this is Matt and welcome to the first in a series of Tea and Philosophy, and today we're doing the shadow and how it works with tea. Now, let's define terms, right? So when I'm talking about the shadow, I'm talking about sort of the classic Jungian shadow, the idea that in each person's soul, in each person's life, in their psyche, in their personality, they have a light side and a dark side. And, you know, a lot of people do believe that to actually become a powerful, actuated, enlightened person, you have to integrate that shadow. Now, everybody knows what the shadow is, right? Everybody knows what the dark side is. Everybody knows that part of them that if they let that part of them have full reign over their life, it would destroy their lives. And everybody knows what it is, right? Everybody has their shadow. It's no surprise that people have a shadow. Now, with tea, I find that there's I'm going to use a couple different examples. The first one is this one right here. This one is the honey fragrance black tea. And this is really one of the first teas that I fell in love with. It was one of the first teas that I really was introduced to in the sense of a hipster tea, right? It's the story behind this tea is it is a bug-bitten tea. So it needs to be, at least for 6 months or so, it needs to be completely agrochemical free so that bugs will come. And when they bite the tea leaves leave a residue. They have a defense mechanism, and that residue stays on the tea leaves. And when it's picked and it is processed the right way, that residue becomes this wonderful, sweet honeycomb flavor. So here's the story of how that tea came to being. The area just south of where I live, there's a town called Rayshui. And up in Rayshui, there's this hummock. It's a little hill in the middle of this beautiful valley. And they figured out that soil was really good for tea. So about 40 years ago, this is quite a poor village, there was no real, there was agriculture, and other than that, there was nothing. But they decided, you know what, we're going to grow some tea. Now this area is only about 300 meters above sea level, and it is surrounded by farms and agriculture and forests. I mean, it's a very sort of low elevation place. They were thinking they could just do some classic, nothing special teabag tea, basically. And they started growing this tea. Now, what is the shadow of that area? The shadow of that area is, of course, the bugs. There are bugs everywhere. And they started planting these teas, and the bugs would come and they would just eat the harvest every time. And so what they first started to do was they just sprayed the crap out of it, right? Lots of agrochemical fertilizers, nitrogen-based fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, and they just did that. But that's expensive, and it really brings low-quality tea. So they were at the point of basically giving up. But then they realized that if they left the tea and the bugs came and ate their fill, that when the bugs came and ate their fill and they processed it in the right way, they could get this beautiful honey fragrance coming from it. Right? So you took the shadow, which is the bugs, which is the lower elevation, and you added in, integrating that shadow into the final product. So what we have right here is the final product of integrating the shadow. Now, the garden that we are partners with that do this, they go full regenerative for a lot of their gardens. Not all of them, but most of them. They're all organic, and they really have integrated the shadow to create some amazingly beautiful tea. And now in the springtime, their tea sells for $1 a gram, right? Straight up, this tea sells for $1 a gram for a fresh, black, low elevation tea. So they took the worst part of this area, that shadow, and instead of fighting it, they accepted it, they integrated it, and they got success from it. Now, I got another example. So everybody knows Dongding teas, right? Dongding Oolong. And you know the classic example of Dongding Oolongs would be, well, what is the classic example of Dongding Oolongs? Of course, the roast, right? The roast of Dongding Oolongs. Now, why is there a roast on Dongding Oolongs? Well, Dongding itself is actually not that interesting an area. So Dongding, there's other places that have been doing tea longer than they have. They have done tea for a while, of course, right? It's one of the oldest growing regions in Taiwan, but they only got famous because they started roasting their teas. Now, why did they roast their teas? Well, because their teas weren't actually that special. 700, 800, 900 meters above sea level, surrounded by other areas that were higher. Surrounded by other areas, the Sun Moon Lake area, for example, they did a really high quality black tea. And this was way before all the higher elevation oolong started. But they were doing oolongs and it wasn't really all that special. So what they started to do was they started to roast the tea. Now, this area is a really interesting area because the Dongding town is a really small town. And everybody has the last name Su, S-U. So if you ever find somebody that has Dongding tea, chances are they say Mr. Su did it or Grandpa Su or something like that, right? So it's always Mr. Su. And so they had this very tight-knit community, right? So I'm talking about all the shadows, right? How do you integrate the shadows? Well, this is how they integrated it. First, they roasted their teas, right? So they roasted their teas. Now, when you first start out roasting the teas, it's not an easy thing to do. It's actually pretty hard. And so they started roasting their teas, and they got sort of a little bit famous. There's more and more things, a little bit more famous, a little bit more famous. And then because the town was all basically one big family, they got together, they talked about it, and they got good at roasting. I mean, they got so good at roasting. Right now on the site, we have Old Master Dongding, and then we've got the Master Roast Dongding. Both of them are from this town. In the center of the town, there is this village. There's this little area there. And in that little village, that little area there, you have this family of like 200 people. And the family of that 200 people, they're very close-knit. And so they talked and they got together and they figured out how to roast teas. They roast teas better than anybody else. But they also could have done infighting, right? They could have divided up all the plots of tea. They could have fought because they're such a close-knit family. But they took their shadow, right? The fact that it was mediocre tea or not special tea, the fact that they had a really close-knit community, but they used those to their advantage. And they created Dongding Oolong that many people know and love in the world today. Now, for me, an example of integrating your shadow would be, I'm an introvert, right? So anybody who's out there who's an introvert, you know what that means, right? I like going out and socializing, but after I socialize, I got to go home. I got to sit. I got to spend time by myself. I got to recover, right? Extroverts are like, I need more people. I can't be alone, right? And I'm not, no. I'm an introvert. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that if I let that shadow take over me, I would never leave the house. Right? I wouldn't have a lifestyle at all. But what I did was I figured out how to use that introvertedness. And for many years, and up into the present day, about 10 years now, I've been a tour guide. And I've been a tour guide taking people into the mountains, taking people on rivers like this. And if anybody knows an introvert or if they're an introvert themselves, you sort of know that group dynamics are pretty easy for you to tell. You can really tell when the parts of a group, when somebody's not very happy, you can tell right away. When somebody's uncomfortable, you can tell right away. And so I figured out that I was really, really good at leading trips because I could sense what was going on with all the people. It was easier for me to keep them safe. It was easier for me to just sort of go like this and feel what was going on in the group. And so I had, and I guess I still do have, quite a successful career leading people on rivers like this one here. Oops, going over here. Leading people on rivers like this one here in a safe and fun way by integrating my shadow and using that sort of special power that a lot of introverts have, that sensitivity to group dynamics, and using it in something like that. Now, I've got lots of other shadows, right? That's a small shadow, and I'm not going to go into all the other shadows that I have. But, and I certainly haven't integrated them all, by no means am I claiming to be an enlightened being. But I do think the idea of integrating your shadow is something that is fascinating and something that everybody should work on, because everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what their shadow is. And there is a certain power to being able to integrate that shadow. There is a certain power, there is a certain beauty, there is a certain sweetness to taking power away from the shadow, integrating it, and putting it into your life in a positive way. And, you know, with tea, there's two examples of these things that have happened. I can give a bunch of different ones. But you can see here, this beautiful golden color of this amazing tea, this bug-bitten super hipster tea. The sweetness and the flavor from that tea comes from doing just that, integrating the shadow. But thanks for listening. This is the first in a bunch of these that I'm going to try and do. I've got a bunch of topics. If there's anything you want to hear, let me know. If you like these videos, you want to hear more, like, subscribe, and buy some tea from the website. That'll keep me going, and that'll get more of these videos out. But thanks for watching, and I hope there's some good tea in your future.